So we have a ROI calculator on our website, which you can find on the top screen here. And we get a lot of questions about it. So thought it was good just to take a quick spin through and hopefully help our users navigate this and make it as accurate as humanly possible for your practice. So the sliders here are pretty easy to use. So you effectively be able to log in a number of advisors in your practice who anticipate will be using our system. We do now have tier pricing, so there is some adjustments here as you grow your advisor numbers. The software costs do drop per advisor, but I've just assumed 2 because that's about the average practice size. SOAs per month, that can range from 4 to 6 SOAs per month on a 2-advisor practice is what we see. ROAs is a little bit more, depending on how busy the business is at any given time and what's going on that particular time. Reviews are probably the one constant. So I've assumed here that we have 100 client households per advisor, about average, and we're basically reviewing each of those clients once a year. So that's where we get the 17 reviews a month at a practice level for that side. Time to produce SOAs, you can make your own inputs here, but we know this number ranges quite widely from sort of 6 hours up to, in some cases, 20 or 30 hours, depending on the business, the complexity of the advice and your current technology and workflow processes, but 10 hours is typically what we find from our other diagnostics that we do. ROAs are probably taking typically in 1 to 2 hours. Again, can range quite a bit depending on what's in that ROA, but that's typically a guide. We see a lot of businesses doing no change ROAs, so that's kind of like a review, but no change ROAs, and they can be more time intensive because there's a lot more data in those. We see a lot of businesses who are still preparing their own custom PowerPoints, maybe using a little bit of AI now to sort of generate other artifacts to help support the advice. So this is really a digital summary of the presentation. Advice Designer does this automatically, so you don't need to go and build a separate artifact to help summarize and explain the advice. In the same workflow, we are taking the SOA and building a digital version at the same time. And that's obviously anticipation that we move to a full digital SOA experience, hopefully in the near future. Time to produce reviews. This is pretty standard across the industry, about 2 to 3 hours is what we see. Obviously, a lot will depend on where the client's data is sitting, how much work's involved to prep that review, and obviously how much customization you do per client review. Explain maintenance is a question we get a cost of a lot. So this is actually the Advice Wizard maintenance. So many businesses do spend money on maintaining their Advice Wizards, which is obviously making sure that they keep working correctly, they're updated for all the technical content, and those costs do range quite a bit depending on where you're getting your Xplan support from. But for an average sort of business with its own Xplan site, they tend to pay about $700 a month for Xplan maintenance as a guide and support. I might just drop that to $500 just to make it a little bit more realistic. But again, because there's often other services that go with that, but that's a guide. If you do have your own Xplan site and you're running your own wizards, there is a maintenance cost to them, which you do not need with Advice Designer. Advice production with Advice Designer, we're definitely seeing over 2/3 of advice produced under an hour. There is another hour in the process, which is typically the modelling and research components, which still are largely manual, but we're working on ways to improve that in the future. ROAs, we expect most to be well within an hour, if not instant. And reviews, so that's quite a new feature for us, but in some of the simulations we've done with some of our existing clients, we have seen review prep well under an hour now, because providing all the data is clean, it's all inside of Xplan already. We can surface that data. You can create lots of templates and custom text that you want to do and just do that as a repeated process. So about an hour is what you should be shooting for. And in terms of how we capture the ROI, so this is where the most contentious issue is. So we are realistic. The reality is that not all of your time that you capture is either going to fall to the bottom line as extra money. It's just going to create time. And from my experience, you're doing pretty well if you capture 50% of the time savings into other activities in your business. So what I would say with that is leave it at realistic. You can play around with the numbers, but we're basically assuming here that of all the time you're saving doing all these other things, you'll be able to capture at least half of that time back, which might be for new client growth. It could just be working less or giving your team other high value tasks to do and reducing some costs other ways. So that's just the best way to think about it. So how do we measure it here? We've obviously determined an annual monthly saving here, including time and money, of about $5,000 a month. We should be about right if we're hitting our straps on that. Creating additional capacity here for SOAs or other documents that can be reduced in the practice. So that's just the guide to show you, hey, we're unlocking capacity here. How do you sort of capture that? Obviously, your Advice Designer subscription costs are built in here. Your savings on potential Xplan maintenance that you may be paying. And then obviously we break it down into each of the individual components. So you can sort of understand where those areas fit. And what we'd like our users to do is sort of, do this thing at the start, let's track it. And in 6 months' time, let's see how we're performing against that and see what you're doing with that extra time and see where the value's been created. Any questions, just reach out to our team. Happy to take you through it in more detail.